Greetings, Christian Israel. Pastor Eli James here with part 3 of our 3-part series exposing the fact that the Caucasian people are the Israelites of the Bible, the Jews are imposters, and that in the final end time situation in which we are living right now, we have to identify who Mystery Babylon is. And as I alluded to in the previous 2 segments, the vast majority of Christian theologians and even Jewish theologians, since the Jews do not refer to the New Testament and do not consider it legitimate scripture, from their perspective, that of course they are expected to teach about Mystery Babylon, and which is also referred to as Mammon in the scriptures. Mammon is simply the materialistic world system which controls the world economy. It's also referred to as Mystery Babylon in the scriptures, and we're going to identify the board of directors of Mystery Babylon. And I have to say right off the bat that it is a real black mark on the eye of Christian theologians. Virtually every denomination simply ignores this subject. But is a subject of vital importance to every Christian to understand who his oppressor is. And if you do not understand who your oppressors are, and if you falsely support your oppressors believing that they are your saviors, then you are simply going to be a victim. You're going to be a slave to the existing system, as most people already are. We are economic slaves to Mystery Babylon. And most Christians are simply waiting to be raptured. That's another false doctrine the mainstream churches teach today. There's not going to be any rapture. Jesus says very plainly, it shall be as in the days of Noah in chapter 24 of Matthew, and that we will have world convulsions of tremendous proportions, and the vast majority of Christians will be deceived by the Antichrist, as Paul tells us in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, and also Revelation 12:9. The vast majority, the whole world will be deceived by the Antichrist, and that includes the Christian world, especially the Christian world, because they're following the Jews in their impersonation of Israel. They're sending all their donation money to the bandit state of Israel, which is the largest warmongering state on the planet, encouraging the United States and the Arab world to go to war with each other on their behalf, while they stand by and collect the profits. So the Israeli state is nothing but a gigantic parasite, a gigantic black spot on the surface of planet Earth. It's the center, a focal point of evil. It's the focal point of evil. But that's where Mystery Babylon resides, and also in the banking houses of London and New York and other places around the globe, because it's these banking houses that are controlling your life right now. And Barack Obama just donated $2 trillion of your money to support these banking houses, and these banking houses are actually enslaving you. They're enslaving you. They've got the entire world into debt slavery, and none of your media pundits are telling you these things. They're telling you that this banking system must be preserved at all costs, but this banking system is coming down, folks. It's coming down, just as the Mystery Babylon in the book of Revelations is going to be destroyed by Yahweh. It's going to be destroyed by Jesus Christ at his second coming. So this is the subject for today, Mystery Babylon. And the story begins in the book of Daniel. I'm going to start quoting from Daniel chapter 2, verse 31. And this is the image of the 4 beasts. Thou, O king, sawest. He's explaining to Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, what the image that he saw in his dream means. Thou, O king, sawest, and behold, a great image. This great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before thee, and the form thereof was terrible. This image's head was of fine gold, his breast and arms of silver, his belly and his thighs of brass, his legs of iron, and his feet part of iron and part of clay. Thou sawest till that a stone was cut without hands, which smote the image upon his feet that were of iron and clay, and broke them to pieces. Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold broken into pieces together, and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors, and the wind carried them away, that no place was found for them. And the stone that smote the image became a great mountain, and filled the whole earth. Now, here is Daniel's exact interpretation of this dream as he just described it. This is the dream, and we will tell the interpretation thereof before the king. Thou, O king, art a king of kings, for the God of heaven hath given thee a kingdom, power, and strength, and glory. And wheresoever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field and the fowls of heaven hath he given into thy hand, and hath made thee ruler over them all. Thou art this head of gold. So this four-part image from the book of Daniel chapter 2, we are told right here very clearly that Nebuchadnezzar and his kingdom of Babylon is that kingdom of gold. And after thee shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee, and another third kingdom of brass, which shall bear rule over all the earth. And the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, forasmuch as iron breaketh in pieces, and subdueth all things. And as iron that breaketh all these, it shall break in pieces and bruise. And whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of the potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, but there shall be in it of the strength of the iron, forasmuch as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay. So what is the second kingdom? The second kingdom is the chest and arms of silver, and this kingdom is the one that succeeded Babylon, and that is the kingdom of the Medes and Persians. And the image divides this vision into two parts, the arms and breasts. So each arm represents one of the kingdoms, the Medes on one side and the Persians on the other. Then the third kingdom after this is the belly and thighs of brass, and this is obviously, and this is a general interpretation by most Bible scholars. The belly and thighs of brass is Greece, and there's simply no doubt that Greece is the third image of this picture. And then finally the legs of iron and feet of iron and clay represents Rome. And historically we have this succession of empires: Babylon, the Medes and Persians, Greece, and Rome. And the text goes on to say that whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. And this is talking about Rome. And Rome, of course, the legs of iron represent the infantry, the Roman infantry marching across Europe, the territory of Mesopotamia. They went as far as Britain and set up their kingdom in Germany and parts of Europe. So we're talking about the Roman infantry marching across the territory that they subdued. And then the feet of iron and clay represent the fact that once the Roman Empire was through with its expansion and began to settle down as a stable empire, what happened was that the Roman Empire began to decline in its own corruption, and this would give us the image of feet of iron and miry clay. The Roman Empire became stuck in its own mud, and eventually through corruption and deceit, assassination politics in the latter days of the Roman Empire, it finally declined and was overthrown as well. Now the final image of this vision talks about the stone kingdom. The stone kingdom is actually the kingdom of Jesus Christ, which was begun during the days of the Roman Empire, which is not firmly established yet because it's going to take two advents. The first advent simply redeemed the people of Israel so that they would recognize their Messiah. And the second advent is to actually establish the government of the kingdom of Israel. And let's see what we have to read here in the book of Daniel, verse 44. And in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom, which shall never be destroyed. And the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. For as much as thou sawest that the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it broke in pieces the iron, and the brass, and the clay, and the silver, and the gold, the great God hath made known to the king what shall come to pass hereafter, that the dream is certain, and the interpretation thereof sure. What is this stone kingdom? Well, let's turn to the book of Isaiah. Chapter 9, verses 6 and 7, where we are told this. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder. At this point, I have to say that in keeping with the prophecy of Paul at 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, the prophecy of the great apostasy of Christendom before the second coming, the Christian world has abrogated its responsibility to establish honest, just government. Of course, the United States of America was the first Christian republic, and our founding fathers were all Christians. Even Thomas Jefferson was a Christian. He was not a deist, as people constantly slur him with that appellation. The fact is that Thomas Jefferson actually produced his own Bible. He was actually so upset with Paul because he interpreted the message of Paul as being antinomian. That is, he believed that Paul did not teach that the law was to be maintained. Of course, this is a Christian republic based upon law, folks, upon God's law. Common law is based upon the Bible. Biblical law and common law and the United States Constitution are intimately connected, and the United States of America, as we saw in part 1, is actually the reestablishment. It's the New Jerusalem. It's the reestablishment of God's kingdom here on earth. Now, of course, our people haven't realized this yet and have abrogated their responsibility to maintain Christian government under God's law. And that's exactly what the book of Revelation tells us in chapter 21, that the 12 tribes of the children of Israel will establish God's kingdom right here on earth. We're not talking about pie in the sky, by and by, when you die you go to heaven. No, that's not what the Bible's talking about. It's talking about establishing His government right here on earth. Let's continue with Isaiah chapter 9, still in verse 6. And His name, we're talking about Jesus Christ, and His name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. Verse 7, of the increase of His government and peace there shall be no end, upon the throne of David and upon His kingdom, to order it and to establish it with judgment and with justice from henceforth and even forever. The zeal of Yahweh of hosts will perform this. Now we see in the modern world that the Christian denominations are standing by watching Mystery Babylon take over total control of their nations. When Judge Roy Moore tried to keep his monument to the Ten Commandments standing, not a single major denomination stood at his defense, because the Ten Commandments, folks, are God's law. And the Founding Fathers believed in the Ten Commandments, all of the Founding Fathers, directly, not implicitly, directly stated to us that they were motivated by the Bible, by the Christian Bible, in the founding of this nation. And anybody who says otherwise is a liar. It's simply the case that that person is a liar. And so anybody who teaches that the law has been abolished is also a liar, and that is not the case, because you cannot have a kingdom without law. A kingdom must be based on law. And Colossians 2:14 is totally misinterpreted by the televangelists who keep on telling you the law has been done away with. That's an absolute lie. That verse is telling you that the handwriting, the writ of the decree, the indictment against the children of Israel for disobeying His law, that was nailed to the cross, not the Ten Commandments. Read that verse for yourself and you will realize that that verse is simply talking about the indictment, the writ, the handwriting, Whenever you're getting ready to go on trial for a crime, an indictment will be set against you, a list of the charges against you. That's what that verse is talking about. It in no way even suggests that the law has been abolished. Having established the existence of these four beasts and identifying them from the book of Daniel, we will now turn to the book of Revelation, which continues this theme. And there's an intimate relationship between the four beasts of the book of Daniel and, of course, the stone kingdom as well, because the stone kingdom is going to be the culmination of history, the history of planet Earth as the scriptures and the historians have written it. And, of course, without prophetic knowledge of what is getting ready to happen and what is about to happen to all of the Israelite nations of the world and to the entire planet as we endure the convulsions. The Bible says that we must endure these things. We're not going to be raptured out of these things. Jesus tells us those who overcome shall be saved, not those who sit by and watch. Those who overcome these things will be saved. I'm going to turn now to Revelation chapter 13, and we're going to now talk about the beast with 7 heads and 10 horns. Verse 1, "And I stood upon the sand of the sea, and saw a beast rise up out of the sea," sea being people, nations, "having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns." What are these 10 crowns? The 10 crowns are, in fact, the 10 nation states that emerged with the Holy Roman Empire, because as we saw from Daniel, the 4th beast of Daniel was in fact the Roman Empire. And the Roman Empire continued in history for a much longer time after the imperial Roman days. It was succeeded by the papacy. So let's identify now these 7 beasts, the 7 beasts of this image. "And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power, and his seat, and great authority." So the dragon is actually Satan. Satan is the dragon that has power over these beasts. And these 4 beasts just named are actually a reference to Daniel chapter 8, which is a restatement of the 4 beasts of Daniel chapter 2, which we just identified. So we're being told here that 4 of these beasts are part of this image of Daniel, which has 7 heads and 10 horns. "And I saw one of the heads, as it were, wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed. And all the world wondered after the beast." Now, the average Christian theologian assumes that this beast, and the Seventh-day Adventists and many Protestant ministers have identified one of these beasts as the Roman Empire and its continuation as Papal Rome. And it is true, Papal Rome is actually identified with one of these beasts, but it is not going to be reborn as the last beast, as most of these interpreters are telling you. The heyday of the Papal Roman system is over. It had its heyday in the days of the Great Inquisition and the killing of the Protestant saints. And it was actually succeeded by the 7th beast, as we will find out very shortly. And let's continue with verse 4 here before we get into identifying these beasts. "And they worshipped the dragon," that is Satan, "which gave power unto the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him? And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle, and them that dwell in heaven. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints," that is, Christian Israelites, "and to overcome them. And power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations. And all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world." So as according to 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, the entire world will be deceived by this beast in a state of great delusion about what's happening in the world. And Revelation 12:9 confirms this by telling us that this beast will deceive the whole world, and that includes the Christian world too. Paul tells us that Satan shall appear as an angel of light. All Satan has to do is dress up in rabbinical robes or dress up in priestly garb, and the sheeple sitting in the pews will not observe his behavior. They will simply believe his lies. And Jesus tells us, by their fruits shall you know them. So stop listening to their lies and start looking at what they're doing. Look at all the global warfare that's being caused by the beast system today, and the churches are utterly silent about this. They actually are worshiping the beast as we speak. We will find that these false churches are in fact the false prophet of Revelation. So who are these beasts? We're told that there are 7 heads. There are 7 heads to this beast. And we know from Daniel that 4 of these beasts are Babylon, the Medes and Persians, Greece, and Rome. But we find that John, who's given this revelation by Jesus Christ himself, John is living in the time of Rome. So if there are 5 beasts previous to Rome, then we have to go back in history and locate the first 2 beasts. And we find that the first 2 beasts are Egypt, which had a great kingdom, and that was succeeded by the Assyrians, the Assyrian kingdom. Then the Assyrians were defeated by the Babylonians, and then the Babylonians were succeeded by the Medes and Persians, and the Medes and Persians by the Greeks, and then finally the Romans. So that in John's time we know for a fact that the Roman Empire was in power. And these are the days in which he was preaching. And so let's get into the 6th beast, because this is the time during which John is preaching. Verse 9, if any man have ear, let him hear. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. All you warmongers, take note. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints. And I beheld another beast coming out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spoke as a dragon, and he exerciseth all power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. What is the beast whose deadly wound was healed? That, ladies and gentlemen, is Rome. It is Rome, because Rome had 2 phases. It had the first phase of imperial Rome, during which the Caesars maintained power. And after this imperial Roman Empire died of its own corruption, the seeds of the papacy were planted in the city of Rome, but it did not actually take place until much later in history. The fact is, the first pope to call himself as such was in 607 AD. There was no such thing as a bishop of bishops until 607 AD. So after the imperial Roman Empire died of its own corruption, there was a hiatus. There was a period of power, a vacuum of power, which was not filled until the papacy began to assert itself with the Crusades and establishing the Vatican, etc., etc. So as the Vatican was establishing itself and giving itself political power, that's when the Roman Empire began to become reborn. This is the beast that had the deadly wound, which was healed. So the healing of the deadly wound was the papacy arising out of the ashes of imperial Rome and asserting itself as the Vatican. Now we have a direct link between the papacy and imperial Rome. The fact is, ladies and gentlemen, that the Caesars were also gods in human form by their own declaration, okay? And they called themselves the high priests of Jupiter. That was their official status, and that they were known as pontiff. Pontifex Maximus is the official title of the religious office held by the Caesars of Rome. Now we have a situation in which the Vatican, the popes of the Vatican, still retain this title, Pontifex Maximus. And that's why they're called Pontiff. And they have never renounced the office of High Priest of Jupiter. So, ladies and gentlemen, your Pontiff, if you are a Catholic, is still retaining this pagan title. And if you call him Pontiff, you are acknowledging that he's the Pontifex Maximus. So this is absolute proof that the papacy is the rebirth of the sixth beast, the beast whose deadly wound was healed. Now we're going to discuss the seventh and eighth beasts, and here your Christian theologians, your mainstream Judeo-Christian theologians get utterly lost and have no conception of what is getting ready to happen because they falsely believe that Rome is going to be the last beast, but the Bible clearly says that there is going to be a seventh beast and an eighth beast. And without knowing who these beasts are, you cannot possibly understand Scripture. And if you falsely believe that the Jews are the Israelites of the Bible, you will misidentify who the beast is, and you will be worshiping the beast as if he were Christ. And we have to understand that this is a kingdom of deception. The kingdom that rules this planet is totally based on deception, lies, usury, creating false history, rewriting history to suit itself so that we are deceived about who we are. And until we understand who we are and who true Israel is, we will never understand prophecy. So let's now turn to Revelation chapter 17. In Revelation chapter 17, we are told about the seventh and eighth beasts. As I said, the vast majority of Christian theologians never even talk about these last two beasts. They will falsely tell you that the Vatican is going to be the last beast, but that's not true, folks. If you do not understand these prophecies, you will not comprehend what is going on in the world today. So let's turn to Revelation chapter 17, verse 1. And there came one of the seven angels which had the seven vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, Come hither, I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters. Many waters, again, being people, nations. And this great whore is in fact, we will find out, is in fact the international banking system of Mystery Babylon, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. What's this drunk with the wine of her? That's international commerce, international banking. All of the materialistic enterprises that the nations of the earth are engaged in with the international bankers. Verse 3, So he carried me away in the spirit unto the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of the names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns, as we found out in Revelation chapter 13. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color, and decked with gold and precious stone and pearls, having a